Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Can you give me a thumbs up if the sound is okay, Kezia? Amazing. Super. Thank you so much. So today we are going to be talking to India Phoenix, just waiting for them to join us. How are you doing today? That's good to hear. I know that we have been chatting on the messages, so it's really lovely to see you back again. Wonderful. Hi, India. Welcome. If you raise your hand to request to speak, I can bring you up. Hello.
Hello, I think it is working now. Yes, hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a very small and intimate group, which is lovely. It actually means that we can turn this into a full-on conversation between everybody, rather than just me and you, if that's fine with you.
Hello.
Great. So, why don't we just start plainly and simply? I know that you are the branding bruja, and that you are now a purpose-aligned professional with a career that really speaks to you. But I would love to know a little bit more about you than I can read on your LinkedIn profile. So would you care to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is India. I am the branding bruja now, but I wasn't always. I had a career 5 years in the education industry. That's where I started my career, and during the pandemic, made some switches, and am now working as a marketing consultant and management consultant. So I do both. It's very much so aligned with what I want to do and what I want to be doing with my life. So it's all new and exciting. Happy to talk a little bit about that and what led me here.
Amazing. Kezia, I don't know how you feel, but if you would like to pop your hand up to speak as well, and then you can just join in this conversation. If you prefer to just sit there and listen, that is absolutely fine as well. So I'm curious, India, did you always know that where you wanted to end up was where you are now?
No, not at all.
How did you get there?
Oh, that's a good question. I thought I wanted to be a superintendent at a school district. So I was working my way to that and really wanted to get into like higher education and just school leadership in general. So that was the trajectory I was on. I was pretty aligned with that for the early years of my career. And when the pandemic happened, there was a little bit of personal shift as well. I had become a mother. So I already had a child, but I had my second child. And when that happened, my priorities shifted as the world's priorities shifted. So it wasn't just me feeling things that maybe I would have kind of ignored or not really given much thought to, but I spent the first 3 months of lockdown in maternity leave. So I wasn't working. I was just by myself with my son and started to realize just things that I wanted were different than the way that they were going, especially because I was spending a lot of time by myself going on walks, and I enjoyed that. And I knew that it was going to be short lived. I
Mm-hmm.
was going to have to go back to work eventually. I did go back to work. I was fortunate to stay at home for a little bit longer with my son, I think an extra 2 months, just because we hadn't returned to the building yet. And then I did return to the building earlier than most professionals did. So we went back to the building, I think it was still 2020. It was before the start of the fall school year.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went back to work, I realized that this was the exact opposite of what I saw for myself. And I started to sort of weigh the pros and cons.
Mm-hmm.
Is this really what I want to be doing? And is it also like the best for my skill set? At the same time, I was in graduate school, so I was getting my master's in business. And while I was doing that, I was working in an administrative position at the schools, and realized that that was a lot of more where my skill set lied. As much as I enjoyed working in school settings and with children, I felt that there was an opportunity to have the best of both, be able to live the life that I'm living currently and get to sort of flex my skills and still feel challenged while being a parent, and doing kind of a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew it existed, so I had to find my way to it. And I took some time off from work, so I did walk away. I was pretty burned out by the time I walked away. I was just over it. We were doing a lot. There was a lot of compassion fatigue because I was working in a school setting during the pandemic. The families wanted their kids in the building. We were struggling to stay staffed. So I was just dealing with a lot of like work burnout. And then I was also finishing my master's program. I had a newborn at home as well as my preschooler at the time. So it was a lot.
Yeah.
And I took some time off, and it was the best thing that could happen to me.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think a lot of people had, I mean, maybe not exactly the same experience, because it does sound like you had a bit of a perfect storm of things coming together here, but the pandemic shifted for so many people. I mean, I remember, just kind of the way my relationship with the organization that I was, working for at the time changed over the course of the pandemic. And when it came back to that point where they were like, okay, yeah, we need to start coming back into the office, there was just so much resistance. It was like, but you used to go in every single day, and you didn't maybe like going in every single day, but you didn't even consider that there was another opportunity. And then when the CEO was like, yeah, you all have to start coming back into the office, my immediate response was just like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
So you took some time off, and how did you decide to pursue that sort of lifelong storytelling talent that you had and turn that into your career?
Yeah. So I wish I had a nice clear, like it was this and then this and it happened. It was very beautiful. I was a little bit more messy and confusing than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I took some time off. My family and I traveled. Our children were still young, so they weren't even in school. That really gave us some freedom to travel and kind of explore. We moved across the country. So we had been living in Pennsylvania, the East Coast, and we moved to the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. And that really was an opportunity for me to figure out what was important. I think that was what was really the fun piece. And I had at the time, it's kind of funny looking back on it, but I knew I wanted to start my own business. That was what I wanted to do. And I went through probably about 5 or 6 different ideas, and sketched it all the way up to proof of concept. So like really deep dived each of these businesses, and then none of them felt right. And towards the end of, kind of my like 5th or 6th one, I was like, what's really fun is building the business.
Right.
That is the fun part. That's what I'm enjoying. the actual execution and all of that is not really the joy for me. It's helping people build their businesses. So that was how I started as a storyteller, using stories to tell the story of people's business, tell the story of them and how they got to where they were. I do my background. I love books. I love literature. That was what I did my undergraduate degree in. And so it was easy for me to do that, to tell stories. And then I started getting connected to my community. So I started going to community events and I met my business partner. She's the second half of the Branding Brujas. And she was really connected to community engagement and specifically inclusive community engagement. And in America, that's something that we need a lot of. And I think we need it everywhere in the world. But here, there's a lot of tension. And so we started talking about how we can make our practices and the way that we help people write these stories more inclusive so that others that were outside of maybe the traditional customer persona could see themselves reflected in it. And so we added that element more recently. But really what has now evolved is us telling stories for businesses that are inclusive, so that tell the true story of how they came to be, but then also that tell stories for their customers that they feel seen and represented in. And that then ties into management. So we don't just do the marketing piece, which is a huge piece of what we do, but we also do management practices as well, because we realize that it's also internal, something that we both quit our jobs during the pandemic because of the internal conflicts that were happening in the building. And I think a lot of people can relate that workplace cultures got really uncomfortable during the pandemic. So a lot of what we do as well is work with these businesses to help them build strong cultures from within that then produce better products. So it's a little bit of everything that I love, which is really fun. I didn't think that there was a way for me to bridge all these individual passions together, but it does. I get to teach, which is another really cool piece. So I didn't give up my education background. I do a lot of workshop facilitation. So I get to do it all. And it's, I think my younger self would be jealous of me right now.
Which is such a wonderful place to be when you think about it. You know, what would 10 years ago you think about where you are right now? It's such a wonderful way of getting a really positive perspective. And I love how you were talking about the incorporation of the management aspect as well. It's really clear from the research that's done that workplace culture, and particularly a workplace culture that people consider toxic, is one of the key determinants in whether or not there is a high rate of burnout and churn in an organization. And so it's so important to set that culture right from the beginning, and to really teach people where their blind spots are, because we all have them.
Right. And I think that bad culture, it's so easy to slip into it. You don't realize that you're falling into bad culture, especially I think amid the pandemic where there were so many changes. It just happens, and it shouldn't. I think now more than ever, businesses are more aware of it and more mindful of that culture piece. But yeah, I came from some pretty, and sometimes too, I think this is important thinking about burnout. Sometimes cultures can be like really fun and funky and they have all those elements. But then when you get a little bit deeper to what are the values, what are the priorities, that's where you find those burnout pieces as well. And it's kind of masked with the more fun elements of things.
Absolutely. I think, I noticed that as well in organizations that I've worked in, where they've got some of the pieces right. Things like it's really important to call out people who have done a good job and make sure that, hard work and good work is recognized. But then when you look at the examples of things that are called out as being, laudable, that's where you see, oh, actually, there's kind of a problem in these values. So, for example, I remember one time sitting there on a Zoom call, and I don't know if it was the CEO or the chief something officer who called out somebody for dialing in to a meeting while they were on vacation. And, thank you so much for going above and beyond. And my immediate response to that is, that's terrible. We should not be talking about that as a good thing. That is completely disrespecting our own boundaries. That is not taking time for ourselves to recover. That is denying ourselves part of our workers' rights and our total compensation package. Like that for me is a conversation that should have happened of no, do not dial in to this call from your vacation. If you need to be there, then we'll move the meeting, and otherwise we can do without you.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I see that all the time when I'm working with different organizations. Just the things that are celebrated speak the priorities. And when you start to see what they are, and I used to get it. I remember, I was, I think, nursing my son once, and I was like, I'll jump on the call and I'll keep my camera off. And I look back and that's so ridiculous. I didn't have to do that, and it shouldn't have been expected. And I think the other piece too is that it was an unspoken expectation for me as well. I think that sometimes organizations do that as well, where there's this unspoken expectation that you're supposed to work late, or if we're having a lunch meeting that you have to be there. And I think that that's really problematic, and it's what leads to the burnout.
I would absolutely agree. And I think it's so pervasive across so many cultures that we do it to ourselves as well. Even if, you were told, actually, you don't need to be at this meeting. There's a voice inside your head that says, oh, but if I don't go to this meeting, I'm going to come across as not being committed. I'm going to be passed over for something big because somebody who's more keen or more aligned with the organization is going to get picked instead. So I have to I have to behave in this way that is not truly aligned to my values.
Yes, absolutely. And that I think values is something we talk about a lot in an organization. You're looking for them to share your values. And sometimes on paper, I think they do. But when they start to get into the practice, that's where the challenge really arises. And when you call it out, a lot of times you're then treated like you're not a team player. I've had that happen quite a few times where I used to celebrate my team when they wouldn't show up to things, and they were prioritizing, being out of whatever, and obviously within reason. But if they weren't supposed to come to something and they, didn't have to, then good. I'm glad. Use your free time accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
And I would kind of get a little bit of pushback from my higher ups for encouraging my team to take their time off and use that. So I thought that was always very interesting as well. We say we care about those things, but then when we start to practice, it's like, oh, that was just, something nice we said.
Yeah, it can be a conflict quite often. India, I am loving talking to you here, but I would really like to open it up if anybody else has any questions as well. I can keep asking for another 10 minutes, but I would love for this to be a conversation. So Adrian or Kezia, if you have anything that you'd like to ask about India's current business or how she ended up burning out and deciding to build the business of her dreams, please do jump in and say something.
Definitely. Thank you once again for giving me the opportunity as well. I wanted to know, other than burnout, what finally led you to the step of starting your own business? Like, what was the final push that you got other than burnout?
Did I cut you off? I want to make sure I heard the whole thing.
No. Yes, this is it. That's the whole thing.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I think for me, the final step was financial. I had slowly started a little side gig just on the weekends, and I realized I was making a lot more money from that in a lot less time. And that side gig, I happened to spend, it was a driving gig. So I spent a lot of time driving and being alone with my thoughts during that time. And I realized very quickly I could use this job to get me away from my salaried position, which was taking a lot of my I didn't have a lot of excess brain power after my workday was over. And I realized that was a problem. If I had any aspirations outside of this company, I needed brain power, and I didn't have any left. And during this side gig, I had a lot of brain power that I could use. It was a pretty monotonous job. It did allow me the opportunity to make some income. And because of that, I was able to move things around and focus on building my business. And during my workday, because my workday at this side gig became my full-time gig for a while, it was a very brainless activity. I kind of didn't have to think. So I was able to think through the logistics of the business that I have now during that time. And that, I think that freedom of thought. So the burnout led me to part one, right? I knew I had to end. And then that time where I was working, but not expending a ton of energy mentally on it, gave me the time that I needed for to build the business.
Yeah, that sounds like kind of the perfect sort of incubator, having a stream of income, but also that time. I'm curious about that sort of recovery period that you had. I mean, what helped you to move from a state where you felt burnt out, needing to quit, needing to take that time for yourself, to a space where you were then able to access your creativity again?
Yeah, it took time. I would say a few months of sort of just, I don't want to do anything, that sort of mentality of I need to recover. And I was very grateful. I know not everybody has this opportunity, but I was very grateful that we were able to do it as a family. So my family was able to travel and see new places. And I think because I was given that opportunity, that really rebirthed in me my creativity. Not spending every day in an office dealing with problems that weren't my own, constantly managing things that I felt so overwhelmed by, that in the long run didn't really matter all that much. I can say that now, but at the moment felt so pressing. I didn't have any time to do anything else, so I took that time. And then I would say after about 8 months or so, I started to notice I was getting bored again. And I hadn't been getting bored because I hadn't had time to be bored for a while. So once I started to get bored again, that was when I said, okay, something's afoot. There's something that needs to happen here. And that's when I gave myself the time to start building out I swear I have about 10 failed business ideas in my notebook.
But I mean, it's such a wonderful moment when you feel the rebirth of your creativity, and it is something that we do lose as as we become more burnt out. That chronically unmanaged stress really does give you that tunnel vision. The only thing you can see is the problem in front of you, which, if you think about it from a biological perspective, makes all the sense in the world, right? If you've got this stress response because you're being chased by a lion, you do not want to be stopping and thinking, I wonder which running shoes I should put on. No, you want to just start running. So it totally makes sense biologically, but the upshot of that is you just lose that ability to be creative and even to solve problems in the most effective way.
Definitely.
So we've got a couple more minutes here. If you had to give one piece of advice to former you, who was in that space, working in corporate, thinking that all of those problems were the end of the world and the most important thing possible, feeling drained, feeling overwhelmed, newborn and a toddler at home, what piece of advice do you have for former you?
I think that I would tell myself, and I wish I had done this back then, to give myself more time with me. I would try to carve out, 10, 15 minutes here and there by myself, but that time with myself was very valuable in refinding my creativity, in learning my passions again, and sort of in that recovery. I think I might not have burnt out as quickly had I given myself that real quality time with myself. And now I have that freedom, and I do that quite often, and I don't take it for granted. I only wish I had started sooner.
I love that. It's particularly, I think, for women and moms and parents of all kinds, taking that time for yourself can feel impossible. There's so many demands on your time, and of course you want to be there for your family and your kids in the best way possible, but taking that time actually is, yeah, I agree, so important.
Yeah, it makes you a better person when you have that freedom and your head is clear and you just, no one else's voice is in your ear. I think that it's important to learn to hear your own voice and get comfortable with that, because it helps.
It absolutely does. So before we wrap up, just want to give one more opportunity. If anybody listening would care to ask any questions, they've got like anything you'd like to know more about, you've got a little raise hand button that you can lift up to join, and then you can ask your question. Or comment, disagree with us violently or non-violently, however you wish. Oh, Adrian, here we go.
Hello. I just, not a question, but just an appreciation. I just wanted to say, India, really appreciate you sharing your story. I think it's one that so many can relate to. As someone who has recovered from burnout myself, I can really see a lot of myself in your story. So just wanted to say thank you, India and Charlotte, for hosting such an incredible event.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Okay, India, tell us, if we want to know more about branding Brujas, we want to be able to find out more about your journey or the kind of services that you offer, where can we find you, follow you, work with you? Tell us all the things.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm at brandingbruja.com. All my services are available there if you want to chat with me. And I have a podcast of my own with my business partner called Branding Brujas. It's available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We talk about things like this and our business journey. We also provide ways for you to find more of that purpose-driven, mission-driven space in your day. So that is another opportunity. I'm on Instagram at Branding Brujas. And yeah, anyone who's interested in connecting would love to continue this conversation. I'm personally passionate about my burnout journey because it led me to one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Thank you. That's so great. And so, yes, if you are looking for support in your branding journey, or you just want some inspiration around entrepreneurship, that sounds like a great place to go. Do go and find India. If you are currently more at the beginning of her journey and feeling as though burnout might be in your future and you would like some help with that, do send me a DM here on LinkedIn and get in touch with me. I help people to find that balance, to learn to love their work again, because work should not burn you out. And I passionately believe that there is a world of work available to us which works for us and not against us. So it only remains to say thank you so much, India, for joining me today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Charlotte. This was great.
And thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning, depending on which time zone you're in.
Yes.
Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.